Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us for the University of Chicago Women in Leadership series.
Thanks, Joyce. It's really nice to be here. I'm thrilled to be able to participate. Uh,
Tell,
would you
tell
like me?
us what degree did you receive at U in Chicago?
When I was at the University of Chicago, I attended the law school. So I received a JD when I graduated from Chicago.
You have a really interesting background. Before we talk about kind of your memory at University of Chicago, tell us a bit more about what you do right now.
Yes. So right now I am the Senior Vice President and Head Counsel for Business and Technology at Major League Baseball. I work in the New York City league office and work under a general counsel on our business legal side of the house with a team of currently 9 other attorneys and 14 other non-attorney legal professionals in our business and technology team. And we do contract negotiation and contract drafting. We also do consumer protection, consumer data privacy, all of the technology that gets baseball to fans. We actually build and produce a lot of our technology, including our apps and a lot of our video games. And we place technology in our ballparks that helps enhance the game, things that produce advanced statistics and other additives to what's going on to the game on the field to help increase the fan experience. And our team, the business and technology team, does all of the legal work and risk assessment that is involved in getting those contracts in place, getting deals in place, making sure that the league as a whole is protected. In addition, we service the rest of the revenue, most of the revenue generating business outside of media. So that includes all the licenses for any consumer product you might buy that has a Major League Baseball logo on it, whether it's a Cubs jersey or a White Sox jersey. We're licensing the marks for that purpose. All of our national sponsorships, our ticketing platforms, our marketing, our events, the All-Star Game, the World Series, all of the pieces and parts of the legal aspects of those businesses run through our team. So we've got a lot going on at any given time.
It's so fascinating. I don't think I've talked to anyone who works at the Major League Baseball, let alone someone who does what you do. So cool. So, how did you go from University of Chicago Law School to working now here, leading many of the things you talked about here at Major League Baseball?
So that's an interesting story, and it has a deep Chicago tie. I grew up as a competitive athlete in skiing, and I always knew that I wanted to try and work in sports in some way, shape, or form. So that was certainly a driver for me, including while I was at law school. I looked into applying to law firms that did the work as outside counsel for many of the sports leagues and were supporting those businesses as an effort to try and stay in the sports world. But interestingly enough, I made a friend at the law school who's a couple of years ahead of me, in part because he was involved in the Sports Lawyers Association and got me involved as well. We became close, and he left law school. He went to clerk for a judge, went to a law firm. And eventually, when I left law school, I ended up at the same law firm as him. And we continued to stay in touch. We continued to be friends. And though my path diverged from that law firm after a short period of time, his eventually led him to Major League Baseball. And at a point in time where a member of the team he was working with at MLB left, one of the lawyers, he reached out to me and was like, hey, we are going to have an opening. We don't have job openings very often. Would you be interested in applying? It seems like something you would enjoy. And it was immediately before the 2008 economic crash and downturn. And I was at a mid-sized firm that was on the precipice of being hit very hard by that financial downturn. And in the end, I ended up starting at Major League Baseball just a few months later, in large part because of this, Chicago friend I had through the beginning stages of my career, reaching out and knowing that this would be an opportunity that I would be interested in, and he didn't want me to miss it. And the irony is that many years later, he is my next door neighbor in our offices, and he's also a senior vice president here. He heads our litigation department. So the Chicago ties run deep over here at MLB in the legal department.
That is such a wonderful story on many levels. And thank you for sharing that, Sarah. So let's go back to Hyde Park. What was a distinct memory you have from the university?
So it's so funny when I was thinking about this, because one of the first things that popped into my head is actually tied to baseball. We had this incredible experience during our 2L year. I believe it was our 2L year, the fall of our 2L year, where, and I had to reach out to a friend to confirm why it was we did this, where we competed in a softball game against a team from Northwestern Law School in the outfield of what was then US Cellular Field, where the White Sox play, now Guaranteed Rate. And it was just the most extraordinary experience. It was my very first time being on field at a Major League Baseball ballpark. And I remember just being so thrilled and excited to get to do that. And then we won the softball game, which I feel like is a very important key piece of the story. But a law firm who worked with the White Sox gave us the opportunity to go play softball at what is now Guaranteed Rate, and it was just excellent and extraordinary. It was really a high point within the law school experience, and something I feel like I will always cherish my first time on a Major League Baseball field.
What a fun memory. And the fact that you point out that the University of Chicago team won as a key fact is something that we have to point out.
I mean, everyone knows that law students are collectively, as a group, generally excellent athletes. So I think, we really...
So what motivates you in your job?
It's an interesting question. I think, I've been at Major League Baseball for a very long time. And part of the reason that that's true, well, it's really twofold. In the time that I've been here, the organization has gone through significant structural and sort of changes in the core of our business operations. And so for many years on the technology side, we were providing third-party technology services and selling streaming services to third parties. And that was interesting and novel. And then we sold that business. We got out of it. We started doing other things, more focus on baseball. And I think the fact that the job has changed so dramatically every few years for me makes it interesting at all times. There's no moment where it becomes rote, or you're sort of just stuck in doing the same thing over and over again, which I think can happen sometimes, especially in the legal field. But also I look around and I think, the story of my neighbor who runs our litigation team and my boss, our now general counsel, has been my colleague and was part of the team that hired me over 14 years ago. So the three of us have been working together, since that time. I'm the newbie of the group at 14 years in here. And the people I work with, and it's not just them, it's across, the business owners who I work with, who are bringing us our deals and that we collaborate with to make sure we're getting things done. We just have great relationships, and we have a lot of people who've been here for a very long time. And I think that those personal relationships and that sort of expectation of the fact of, you're working with people and who are trying to do something great and are capable of doing something great really keeps it interesting and good and fun. And it doesn't hurt that we're doing that for the purposes of bringing baseball to people, which, the underlying element of the fact that I get to work in a space that brings people joy is never lost on me.
How has the University of Chicago influenced your way of thinking throughout this journey, Sarah?
So I came into law school having majored in college in American Studies. And as I noted, I was a competitive skier. And part of my major was built around what classes could be taken during times when I would be able to travel for my competitive lifestyle and not have to take extra time in college. So there wasn't a specific core focus on any specific area other than timing. And I had not taken any economics classes coming into law school, which the University of Chicago's law and economics basis for the educational process is well renowned. And I was coming in cold, and there is nothing that has influenced my view of the world and how I think about problems then I think that particular analysis and that particular method of thinking about the world. And certainly, I don't know that it applies with all things, but I definitely think it was a critical piece of my education that it's certainly been missing before I got to law school, that really helped shape and redefine how I would look at problems going forward, and really assess risks and issues that come to my desk on a day-to-day basis.
You are leading a team. You're working with many, whether it's high caliber athletes, team owners, and other key stakeholders. You're a leader yourself. What leadership qualities do you look for in others?
So I actually think that empathy is one of the most critical and key leadership qualities that helps folks excel. And I don't mean that in the sense of being, overly sympathetic. I truly mean empathy. I think really good leaders are best at, they can relate at some level with their team, with their people, with the folks that they're trying to bring along and hopefully inspire. And I think it's really important to find the places where you relate with the members of your team. And I think, my team right now is 23 folks of, they are varying ages, they are varying backgrounds, they are varying skill sets. And it's important, I think, to have some degree of knowledge and personal connection and understanding of where they're coming from to help them do what they need to do in their best possible way, and to figure out the ways where within the structure of the company's policies and guidelines and the parameters of the job, you can make an environment that works best for that employee to succeed.
Let's talk about fun questions. So which Major League Baseball team is your favorite? If you cannot answer that question and you need to refrain from answering that question, what's the favorite thing you like to do in the city?
Okay, so technically and officially, while attending games as an MLB office employee, I am neutral. I have no stake in who should win, who I prefer to win or lose. Though it is a well-known fact around the office that I grew up in Massachusetts, and I am a lifelong diehard Red Sox fan, which is actually, there are two major Red Sox moments in my time at the University of Chicago that are also key memories. The Red Sox won their first World Series in 86 years while I was a law student, and the weekend of my graduation, the Red Sox played the Cubs for the first time during the regular season ever. And I got to go to those games. Those were amazing. But yeah, I am an absolute tried and true Red Sox fan, though my years in baseball have definitely led me to a place where I am appreciative and knowledgeable of all of the clubs in such various and different ways that I appreciate them in different ways. I know their lawyers, I know their people. I think of them in very different ways than just the players on the field. But what's my most favorite thing to do in the city? I just love a day at the Met and walking across Central Park to go get lunch after. Very old school. Just
very New York
around the Met.
Yes, very New York as well. So last question, Sarah, what advice would you give to early career alumni, mid-career alumni, anyone who are graduates of University of Chicago, whether entering law, working law, or outside of law?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really basic and simple in that staying in touch is really critical and important. It's really, and networking, I think, can be hard for some folks, and it sometimes feels awkward or uncomfortable, but we have so many ways to keep generally in touch with people and generally know where people are, and to reach out to people who have a connection. And those connections, alumni connections, having come from the same university, having had those life experiences, never go away. And you should never be sort of worried or concerned about reaching out to someone, even if that's your only connection with them. And those types of connections and relationships can pay dividends in the long run. They might spark things that you didn't know could exist. Though historically, my answer to this, the what's your best way to find a path forward is to always, find a Mitch. Like Mitch helped me find this job. Mitch is still here helping me out. But it's sort of a truism, find your Mitch, find your person, or people who will think of you when something comes along that is in your interest area, and be that person for someone else. Be the person who reaches out to say, hey, I heard about this and I remember you used to enjoy doing this sort of thing. Is this the type of thing you would like to look into applying for? And those types of connections and sort of community involvement can really pay dividends in the long run.
That's wonderful advice, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview. And thank you for everything you're doing for the alumni community and for sharing your story today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.